Hi, my name's Mick. I'm going to spend about 10 minutes talking about the shoulder and how yoga can help the shoulder functionality. I'd like to kick off by a very simple sentence, which is just imagine a Dutch water girl riding the bike to get married. That's how I remember the importance of the shoulder, and I'll come back to that hopefully at the end and it will make more sense. But the shoulder is a very interesting, complex structure within our body. In many ways it's like the hips because of where it's located, but it's also very different. The hips are built for stability. A lot of that stability comes from, we have the hip socket and the ball of the leg coming in, the connection, and that just sits in, and gravity is holding the hips onto the leg. With the arm, the connection point is incredibly shallow, so you have the ball and socket. The ball, without the muscles and the ligaments, the arm is just going to fall off. So all day long these arms are trying to fall off, and so all day long the ligaments and muscles have to hold it on, and that takes an incredible amount of work. And so it's important to recognise and understand what's going on. And what I'm going to touch upon in the video is not the detail of what the muscles and ligaments are doing, but more the underlying processes that are being used to both ensure that we have stability in the shoulder, but also we have this incredible mobility that effectively makes us human. So a very simple description of the construction. We have the humerus, we have the scapula, we have the clavicle. That's all the shoulder girdle is. And we've got 4 points of connection. And I'm saying connection as opposed to joints because they're not all joints. They are simple connections, some of them. We have a connection here where the clavicle connects to the sternum. It comes across and it connects to the scapula, and the scapula then connects to the humerus. The scapula also connects to the rear, but it's a floating bone. It doesn't actually fix anything. It's just literally just floating across the back, and that's what gives it its mobility. And the fascinating thing is, if you were to disconnect the clavicle and just pop all of this off, and that would weigh in the region of 8 to 15 kilograms. That's a lot of weight. That's an incredible amount of weight. Your maximum limit you can take onto Ryanair in the cabin is 10 kilograms. So you wouldn't be allowed to put your arm in a bag and take it on the plane. And you've got this 10 kilograms hanging off this core skeleton all day long, which is why the muscles have to work really hard, which is why often it's prone to tension. Because if we don't have that working effectively, this is where we can get tension, because you're just holding this weight. And that's the role of yoga, is to help create a sense of balance so we maintain that stability and mobility within the shoulder. And so if we think about the nature of this arm coming up and connecting across the clavicle, and it connects to the sternum, and you've got the other clavicle coming across here, what we have is a yoking mechanism. Now the yoke is, if you've seen pictures of the little Dutch water girls, and what they have is a stick or a yoke that goes across, sits across the shoulders, and you have connections either end, which is effectively the joint socket, and coming down in here you have the powers of water. And that's used as a very, very effective way to maintain stability, to carry weight, but gives mobility. And this notion of this yoke as a carrying system is widespread. If you go to Russia, you will see the fishermen carrying the fish like that. If you go to Africa, you will see the hunters carrying the animals back like that. And if you go to China, you will see them carrying wares to market like that. This mechanism is incredibly powerful and flexible and mobile and stable, and that's what we have sitting here. It is a yoking system, but where it's different to this is because we have this split across the sternum. Rather than being like that, we have this ability, and that's the power of the shoulder, the ability to have that stability to carry weight, but also that incredible flexibility. And if you think about the extremities of what the shoulder can do, on one hand you've got someone who is free climbing up a mountain, clearly not me, and to the other end of the spectrum you've got someone who's using the dexterity of the arm and the hands to repair a watch. So the shoulder mechanism is incredible in terms of what it gives us as human beings. It's what differentiates us from the animals. So the muscles and the ligaments are there to maintain this. We've got two different types of muscles, and the names are immaterial for this video. But the point is, the first set of muscles are the rotator cuffs, and you have the rotator cuffs are like a grip, And I liken this, if you think of a junior school or an infant school, and you've got maybe 4 routes to school, and you've got all these kids coming to school, and you will often see the headmistress or headmaster stand at the gate to regulate the flow coming in. And what the rotator cuffs do, you've got 4 muscles in a rotator cuff, and they all come together to form a connection, a joint connection, and they sit across the shoulder. These 4 muscles come in, and they're there primarily to hold this in place. In the same way as a headmistress or headmaster holds those channels of energy coming into the school, the rotator cuff is there to A, hold it, and also to sometimes give an initial momentum just when you're trying to move. But the rotator cuff is critical. Without that, the arm just falls out. And so that's the first set of muscles to be aware of when we're doing yoga, is are they working effectively? And the rotator cuffs are really, really important. And so once we understand that rotator cuffs are there primarily for the stability and to hold that in place, we have to then look at the mobility. How do we move this around? And there's lots of muscles, but 5 key ones I'm going to talk through, not for what the muscle is, but I think what the thing to look at is the arrangement, how the muscles laid out, because that's an integral part of the shoulder girdle and the effectiveness and how it gets mobility. So if we're looking at these 5 different muscle groupings just in terms of where they sit around the shoulder girdle, the first one is the deltoids, and they sit across here. You've got a group of muscles coming across, and they give stability and also give some initial movement. And hold on to this point of these muscles converging to a central thing, because that's going to be a key theme here. So if we look at the next 4 muscles, and the actual name of the muscles is immaterial and what they do is immaterial for me, the point of them is to understand the arrangement, because that's the critical point. So we have the trapezius, which is a group of muscles that spray out, and they come around, they connect to the shoulder here, and they spray all across from the neck all the way down. We then have the lats, and the lats again come from here, and they're going underneath, and they're going around the back. Okay, and they're responsible for pulling the arm down and towards the body. So again, we've seen an interesting arrangement here with a spray of muscles all coming to a common point. We then have the pectorals, the pecs, that come from here, again from this common point, this single muscle coming out and then spraying out and coming across here. And these are responsible for flexing and rotating the arm. And then we have the serratus anterior muscle, which is the punching muscle. That's the boxer's muscle. That's coming from here all the way down. And so if we think of these 5 muscles that come like that, there, why are they arranged like that? And that's because they're incredibly efficient in terms of how they manage force. If you think about the arm, which is maybe 10-15 kilograms, plus it's carrying a load of shopping, all coming through this central point, how do we manage that force through the body? And we do that through radiated tension. And an example of that is a bicycle wheel. If you take the hub of a bike wheel, all of that weight is coming out through the different hubs and spokes, right? So no single spoke has to take all of that weight. And it's that sharing of weight across those spokes that makes biking so efficient. And what we have here is effectively a wheel structure. You've got all of these muscles that are radiating, and that's what makes it so efficient. It gives it both stability and incredible ability to take lots of weights if you take weightlifters and how much they're lifting, but the mobility as well. So in terms of this mobility, we can look at, so what movement can we get? In terms of the shoulder girdle, coming back here, we have a range of movements that we can do. We can do what's called a protraction, which is moving it forward. We can do retraction, we can do elevation, and we can do depression. And there's a rotation where if we put our arm up, it's rotating. If we put our arm down, it's twisting in. So there's 6 ranges of movement there. And then on top of that, with the arm, we have a flexion where we can lift it. We have an extension where it goes back. We have abduction where it goes out. Adduction. We have a rotation out, and we have a rotation in. And so within this shoulder girdle, you've got this amazing range of movements. So the point of yoga is to ensure, on one hand, we're maintaining these various ranges of motion to their full effect, but also maintaining the muscle so as we've got the stability and the strength to be able to carry the weight. Okay, so we have 2 things. We have the yoking system, which gives the ability to carry the weight, and then we have the bicycle wheel, which gives the ability to spread that weight load out, and between them they maintain flexibility. And if you bring those 2 together, you suddenly get the secret of the shoulder girdle. And this is where I'm coming back to the Dutch water girl on a bike to go and get married. And if you look at the construction of a very, very expensive, I assume it's very expensive, wedding dress, it has what's called a hoop system. And the hoop system is effectively what the shoulder girdle is doing. A wedding dress will have a series of hoops that are connected and allow the wedding dress to look like it's floating. And an even more interesting wedding dress, as you might have 4 hoops, and what happens is hoop 1 is connected to hoop 3, hoop 2 is connected to hoop 4, and you get both movement and twisting within the dress. And that's when the bride is walking down the aisle. There's this incredible sense of floating. And floating is the key word here, because when we're doing yoga or when we're moving our body, we should have the shoulder girdle and the arms should be floating off of the body, right? And the whole point is to have that freedom that isn't locked in to the core skeleton. And so if we look at those 3 things of the Dutch water girl on a bike to go and get married, what we're looking at is the shoulder girdle that we're trying to look after in yoga is a yoking system. So it's managing this structural framework with the bicycle, which is bicycle wheel. So we're making sure that we're radiating that energy all over the body. And the third thing is the hoop system is to get in that sense of floating within the shoulder structure and that sense of independence within the arms. And what your yoga practice is trying to do is trying to look after those things. It's trying to make sure that the bone structures are robust. It's trying to make sure the joints have got movement in them. It's trying to make sure your rotator cuffs have got the stability, because that's where a lot of damage can occur in the rotator cuffs. And we're trying to make sure that muscle system is strong enough to maintain the weight. So it is an incredibly complex system that needs a serious amount of focus, and that's what I find that yoga can do. From a very few simple yoga postures, we're starting to address all of those elements within the shoulder girdle. I hope that makes sense, and good luck with your yoga.